Hello everybody, Dr. K here once again to hold forth on pretty much my favorite day of the week, Saturday, Shabbat. I don't know if many people don't like Saturday, and I don't know of a lot of people who love Monday, but anyway, I always like to say God was in a great mood when he created Shabbat, Saturday. Good to be with you again. Scout is happy as a clam. I don't know what that phrase means or where it comes from, but there it is. Beautiful day here in Colorado Springs. I call it San Diego weather, about 68, 70 degrees, sun shining, no bugs in the air, and no humidity. Those are two laws, I think, they legislated here in Colorado. It's a beautiful day, and I always want to say in the neighborhood. Today, again, is some serious business, but always laced with a lot of hope because we're talking about God, who is the ordainer of the direction that business takes ultimately, notwithstanding this quizzical little thing he gave us called free will. Anyway, let me pray real briefly and we'll get started. Father, I do praise you for my life. I'm turning 79 next week and I chuckle, I really do, as I mumble to you in the car. I don't know how you did it, Lord. I don't know how you pulled it off given some of my past, but here I am, and pretty much the catbird seat. I love what I'm doing very much, even if a lot of other folks don't. And I thank you and praise you. Holy Spirit, I invite you as the guest of honor and the teacher to oversee and direct what happens here today in the next hour. In Christ's name, amen. Title of our study today, Notes on America's New Pharisees. Eyes wide open versus wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Quite a choice. But there it is. There's our choice. The scripture for today is from Matthew 16, 1 through 4, reading in the New King James, which is pretty much my preferred version anymore. Then the Pharisees and the Sadducees came, and testing him, asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. Hypocrites! You know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. There's so much in that one passage. We could do a month on it, minimal. The last line strikes me even now as I read it. And after Jesus rebuked the religious hypocrites, he left them and he departed. There's a prophecy there, pastors. There's a prophecy there, Christian leaders and teachers. We'll get back to that. Quotation this time, Mark Finley, if you're listening to this or reading it, you're going to love this part. This is from Frederick Douglass, published in 1845 from his narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. This is powerful stuff, and you may be wondering, why am I reading such an old quotation from 1845? Nothing I put in here has no bearing on what we're going to discuss today, and I think you'll see what I mean in just a moment. Douglass wrote, I therefore hate the corrupt, slaveholding, women-whipping, cradle-plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of the land. I look upon it as the climax of all misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels. Never was there a clearer case of stealing the livery of the court of heaven to serve the devil in. I almost said, blessed be the reading of Mr. Douglass. I could well place those words at the very, very front of any number of presentations I would give to describe the current American church. First thoughts. Every now and then, God breaks into my daily routine and directs my path in specific ways. It's not an everyday thing. It's just every now and then. So I'm not going to come off as some hyper-spiritual spooky guy. But anyway, as it turned out, a little bit of a story here. It was Monday, September 11th, and I was deciding where to have breakfast that morning. I don't hardly ever do this, but sometimes, kind of increasingly, I said, Lord, I know that this isn't particularly interesting to you. You got big stuff to handle, but do you have a place you'd prefer me to eat breakfast today? Clear as a bell, a couple times in a row. Omelets Parlor. Omelets Parlor. That's a favorite place. I'm going to read you a little bit of a history of it. So I said, okay, just in case that's you. Here we go. The history behind this amazing breakfast house, open from 6 a.m. to 1:50 p.m. every day, is this, just a little bit. The story dates back to 1893 when it was built and then purchased to be the retirement home of famous movie star Ruth Etting and her husband. The pair later turned it into a restaurant known as the T-Bone Club, which eventually became the Hackney House. I know if you're not a Coloradan, you don't care, but just humor me. In the early 80s, the building became the Omelet Parlor, which at the time was an old Western chain. In 1993, this Omelet Parlor, where I was on my way to, became independently owned. Today, it's the only remaining omelet parlor in the nation. They haven't even changed the hardwood floors, the booths, or the service since 1893. It's a pretty cool place, and the food is killer. And the servers are amazing. A number of them have worked there. I think the one I'm going to talk about today said she worked there for 17 years and wouldn't think of leaving. Anyway, I sat down about the time I was prompted to ask for a particular server. I'd only met her or had her serve me once. I won't give her a name. I'm going to divulge some details here. Anyway, turns out she was going to serve my table again. I asked for her, and she happened to be standing right next to me, and I said her name. And anyway, one thing turned to another. I don't know this woman very well, probably in her late 30s, early 40s. Turns out that she has 6 children, partnered with an alcoholic, just out of jail for a DUI, and she had been praying I would show up that day. I didn't know she was a Christian. I don't know she's a Christian, but she's a woman of prayer. And as we chatted about all this, she disclosed more about her partner's addiction. I was surprised to learn of my similar past with booze. Next thing I know, I plan to meet with her. They're going to get married, I've found out very soon. Her partner, a few days later, discussed the Lord's power to deliver him. I met with him at a wonderful place, another coffee house here down the south side called, see what happens to me in front of the camera, Switchback. It's a mountain term around here. And we sat there for a better part of an hour, and he poured his heart out. A lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of anger. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell too much on this, except one thing led to another. I said I would buy him a Bible. He was very excited about that. He was very interested in the Lord. He'd been in that last bout in jail for about a month or two. I can't remember. He met a guy who came to his cell and said, I'm supposed to be here and talk to you about the Lord and the Bible. And he started reading to him, and something went inside of him, and his interest was piqued. Anyway, to make a very long story, still in development short, I'll be meeting with them early next week. I bought them both a Bible. I always have their names not written, but what do you do when you brand? It's kind of a brand deep into the leather. Anyway, they're going to meet with me next week and just told me they're going to get married. They've been together off and on for a few years. One more detail of why I told this crazy story. The real point of the story. That same morning, I had frankly been somewhat tearful in my morning devotion, in the flesh, not in the spirit. Just, poor me. Lord, I love doing this work. I put all these hours into it. And again, I mentioned it before, I can get hardly anybody to listen to me or read what we have to offer. And I didn't hear anything from the Lord in return. But after talking to this young lady and this young man, who both made this point, they had apparently watched one of my YouTube videos. One of these is flaming blood, fire, and smoke stuff. And they thought it was great. And the reason they thought it was great, they left the church. I know she did. A few years back, she said exactly what we've been talking about. She could not bear the hypocrisy and the sweetie pie talk. She's got a rough life. She doesn't have time for sweetie pie talk. She's got to hear the real deal. All of that bears up powerfully upon the point today when Jesus calls out hypocrites and tells us to do the same if we see it in the church. But I tell you, beloved, I can't find nary a whisper or a shadow of this sort of thing going on in the church today. Now, I'm nobody. I got a small following of a few hundred folks, and that's not a lament. It's a complaint, not against heaven. It's a complaint I'm lodging again against the church. Why is this? Why is that? I've been addressing it for 3 years now, and I'm only getting started. Thesis. I wrote this essay around my deepening conviction that a new generation of American Pharisees has risen up from the dark quagmire of MAGA Christian nationalism. To this day, I have never heard one pastor in 8 years say those words from the pulpit. Not one time in 8 years have I ever heard an American pastor say, by the way, beloved, be careful of Christian nationalism. If you have, write me in the thread and name that brave pastor and the name of the church, and we can pray for him. So before I deep dive into this vital, timely, and historic controversy from a new perspective, let me define our terms first of all. Let's define Pharisee. I'm going to come at it 2 or 3 different ways today, so I started to say chill out and wait. Be patient. Here's one definition from the editors of Who Were the Pharisees? Bible Portal, November 29th, 2022. Here's what they wrote. The Pharisees were one of 3 main groups within Judaism in New Testament times, of which the Sadducees and Essenes were the others. Pharisees were the most numerous, distinguished, and popular sect among the Jews. The 3 principal sects are supposed to have originated about 150 years before Christ, and nothing is said of them in the Old Testament. They derive their name from the Hebrew word farash, which signifies separated, set apart. Might insert special, entitled. I could use some other synonyms. Because they separated themselves from the rest of the Jews to superior strictness in religious observances. Not the observances. Now here's the thing. I started reading this and I said, God, that sounds like us. Listen to the distinctives. First of all, they were strict about the observances of religious rituals created by men, not by the scriptures, created by men. Big, big point. Also, they boasted of that from their accurate knowledge of those religious rituals, and they were the favorites of heaven, and thus trusting in themselves, not God, not Yahweh, not Torah, not the scriptures, traditions of men. This is huge. That they were righteous, despised, and they despised all others who did not agree with them. We're just getting started again. The significance here. Here's one other rendering, I thought a little bit more to the point, from a blogger named Jorge. He's a Latino, so of course I favor him. Jorge keeps his last name private for a number of reasons that should become obvious to many of us now. From a piece, The Pharisee, An Honest Look at Their Sin, published April 10th, 2014. Listen to what he writes on top of the other piece. Hypocrisy, twisting of scripture for their own traditions, self-aggrandizement, and rejection or obfuscation of the gospel of Jesus Christ are the markings of a Pharisee, or the sin of being Pharisaical. First charge that was ever leveled at me from the entire faculty of Regent University as long ago as 2015, when I started this battle, or joined it, I didn't start it. Pharisee, legalist. We don't need your kind around here. In fairness, that was a while ago, 8 years ago. I don't know where individuals stand anymore, except for a couple who secretly have to tell me that they're in some agreement, but they can't say it publicly. They cannot say it out loud. One longtime faculty member and former administrator there, I'll never name him, 2 years ago said, Cliff, so far as I can see, and he's very moderate, he's not one of us, CBN Regent University is a cult. It's become a cult. He writes a little further down. These are strong accusations. The rebukes levied against the Pharisees were of the strongest that Jesus ever uttered. Many of you don't like my tone and like the fusillades that I launched toward the church. This ain't nothing compared to what Jesus said. And this ain't nothing compared to what Jesus will do to those who don't listen to them. I have no authority to do that. I have no authority to condemn. I have the authority to warn. Big difference. We should be very careful to flippantly toss out such accusations at a brother or sister who is indeed trying to point to the Word of God. When you're trying to do that, we've got to listen, even if we don't agree. Are there present-day Pharisees? Sure. However, I'd wager that they aren't the ones commonly labeled Pharisaical for pointing out the Scriptures to a pastor that have become sacrosanct. Someone who preaches himself or preaches only law without the gospel, truth, not just love, truth, the canon, the gospel, the truth, who weighs a man's tithing before serving him as his shepherd. These are the indicators of a Pharisee, not the one who is doing everything they can, however imperfectly, to exercise discernment and objects to questionable teaching in the church today and insists on sound doctrine. Put me at the front of that line. Put me at the front of that line. So let's take a closer look at some of these matters by looking first at a little bit of a deep dive, the new American Pharisees. As I've said before, one of the joys of this job as a trained professional researcher, got to have a little Java. This is not a boast. I've always had a curious mind, ever since I was a kid. Got me in trouble. Back then, gets me in trouble today. I've always wanted to know. The first encyclopedias that my mom and dad gave me, and make sure the timing is okay, was in I was born in 44, but 1956, 55. It was a 10-volume set of World Book Encyclopedias. 10 volumes. All the knowledge of mankind you could put on your shelf with a space of about that much. And I don't know why, but I first turned to 11 years old. I didn't know. I opened up the volume that was marked S, and all of a sudden, solar system and Saturn and space and all this stuff just exploded in my face in black and white pictures, and I was enthralled. Not so much with the pictures, but with the thought of a young boy, of the cosmos, the bigger picture. I had a sense of who God was. I'd gone to a Christian school for 3 or 4 years, and so I was enthralled with this from a very, very early age. But anyway, that has launched me as a PhD scholar, if I can call myself that, on this. The search for the grail, the search for the gold, the search for the truth, the search for the answers, the search for the answers to the big questions. My first A was in Dr. Virginia Ringer's philosophy course. I was 17 years old. The year was 1962. And all I remember is the book was entitled The Enduring Questions. That's who I am, and I keep doing it. And I hope you're benefiting by it more than being assaulted by it or insulted. Anyway, I love the search for the golden nuggets. Mentioned that before. Found a beauty. J.R. Shreve has, I believe, as a young man, got more wisdom in his little pinky than most of the church does in their collective body. He's the author of a blog by his same name, does not list his academic credentials. I assume he's a college grad, I don't know. But only that he desires to mine the truth out of the labyrinth of festering lies that permeate American culture and most especially the American church. Strong charges. In just one essay published 4 years ago, in 2019, he rips open what every Christian leader, pastor, teacher, and disciple should have known and proclaimed since that time, if not before. That truth that comparatively no one, I say no one, has had the temerity or the fear of God to present. I mentioned an example just a year ago. I never hear those words in church. You know? MAGA, Christian nationalism, or Christian nobody addresses it. Why is that, Pastor? Why haven't you addressed it? Do you think possibly it is relevant to what's going on in America and the church today? Hear his bold voice in the midst of this abysmal silence of the lambs. From the essay, The Party of the Pharisees, Christians and Politics, January 21, 2019. Snippets on bullet points. There's a whole lot here, so I have to kind of move along as usual. He writes, throughout the ministry of Jesus, he consistently confronted and voiced displeasure, that's putting it mildly, you might insert the word holy anger, with a certain political and religious class within first century Palestine. They were called the Pharisees. The Pharisees did not hold all the political power of the day. And he talks about the Sadducees and compares them. Second point, the entire chapter of Matthew 23. I've quoted it to you before, so I'm not going to do it again. It's very long, 30-some verses as I recall, when Jesus confronted the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious elites, and the scribes. They were all in the square, in the public square. I don't know exactly where it took place, in Jerusalem. And he rebukes and warns them all publicly, loudly, about these religious leaders and the complaints that he had toward them. They are called the 7 woes. That's your homework for tonight as follow-up. Read Matthew 23, the first 37 or so verses, maybe 38. If you think my talk is tough. This is not he writes, I love this. This is not the touchy-feely Jesus only about love that a lot of Christians reference today. It is an explicit rebuke toward a system of leadership that has obstructed spiritual growth and development among God's people. This obstruction was brought about for the sake of retaining Pharisaical power, influence, and gains within the society and generation in which they lived. This is a simulacrum of what's going on today. Fancy word, look at that. Next point, he comes right down to where the rubber and meets the road and where the bone meets the marrow. Love writers like this. Conservative Republican Christianity, the religious right, has become the party of the Pharisees. Boom. We could end now, but you know I won't. There's more to the story. But I love men and women, young men and young women, children, who say it straight ahead. That's the model I'm following. You know what the model is? I'm not supposed to have statues, but somebody gave me this from Jerusalem years ago. The Christ carrying a sheep, the one sheep that he went after. He's the template, beloved. I don't follow even Paul or Peter or John or Matthew or any of the rest as much as I'm trying to imitate and follow him. He's the, God, he's the one who directs us in good things and bad things. He's the one that hates and loves. You won't hear that in the church. And I'm trying my best to love what God loves and hate what he hates and tell you about it. I don't hear it in the church. I hear a lot about what he loves. Apparently he loves everything and everybody all the time. I didn't know that. Because it's not true. It is not true, Pastor. He goes on to finish that graph. Those who in the name of God, here's where my anger is, beloved. Not about what they say or do to me. It's nothing that I've been fired and harassed and death threatened. I don't care about that very much at all. You can ask the Lord. I don't think about it very much at all. I don't. You know what I think about? The next statement. Those who in the name of God lead believers toward beliefs and outrages that support their personal power and influence rather than the kingdom of God. You want to tell me that somehow it is correct, right, and true to compare the Donald Trump definition of Christian nationalism to the holy book of books? And it's being done, beloved, either by silence or affirmation or proclamation. It's being done. This is beyond sacrilege. This is beyond blasphemy. It's a death warrant, if you will, for those who continue to preach it. It is a death warrant. That's what the scriptures teach. But we haven't heard that in ever so long, generations, 2 or 3 perhaps. Jerry Falwell, my favorite, was a pioneer in the religious right movement. He has since passed away, but his son, my favorite, Jerry Falwell Jr., presumably carries on. Now remember, this was written in 2019 before his fall from grace, to put it mildly. Carries on in the tradition of the standard of political activism. Falwell remained the leader of liberty and he was the first out of the gate, January 2016. Got up on his parapet nationwide. Donald Trump is God's man, sent by the Lord. Another Cyrus. Good Lord, I just heard. You wonder why I keep throwing bombs toward Jim Caviezel, who, famous from The Passion of the Christ, 2004, and now, this year, the movie about the sex trafficking, Sound of Freedom. It's a wonderful topic, but the director is heartbroken. Why? Because Caviezel continues to speak out as a mouthpiece for QAnon. You know what he just said? Just yesterday, it's in the news, you check it out. Caviezel said, Donald Trump is just like King David. You wonder why I'm hot around this collar? That should seal the deal. Falwell Jr. said later in 2016, conservatives and Christians need to stop electing nice guys. Make that read, stop electing morality people and just elect the guys who can get the job done. And hundreds of millions of Christians followed him. You may be one. Get out of that rat pack once and for all. If you value your life, you value your eternity, you value your family, and you value the Lord, get out of there. Robert Jeffress has been, he writes, among the most vocal and consistent supporters for Trump since 2016. He was the one who argued on the immigration policy. Even heaven has walls. Let's wall them out. Get rid of them. We don't want those people here. Something in the scriptures about be gracious to the widow, the orphan, the foreigner, the alien. It was probably for just the Old Testament. Ralph Reed was among the early and most influential leaders of the religious right in the 1980s and 90s, serving as the first executive director of the Christian Coalition. Still now runs, what does he run now? Something called the Faith and Freedom Coalition, with a revenue last year, 2021, of $29,681,130. Christians keep sending them the money to promote that. I remember even back then, when I was part of all this, I was a member of the city committee of Chesapeake, Virginia, and Ollie North was running for the Senate, holding hands with Ralph Reed. For those of you from Virginia, Chesapeake, Great Bridge, where we lived, is just this lovely little community with a canal and a bridge going in, just kind of a tight, wonderful little community. I was in the process of running for the chair of the city committee at the behest of former or later mayor, and I was, feeling my oats a little bit. I was still young, All of a sudden, I know Ralph Reed is in the newspaper with Ollie North. They're going to come in and commandeer all the political agenda for Great Bridge, Virginia. Always had a fire in my bonnet. I got with a couple of my guys, and we told them in no uncertain terms, get the blank out of Chesapeake. You're not wanted here. Proud of that, and they left. And they left. They were working with Pat Robertson and the Christian Coalition and all that stuff. You know, I don't know. It was before I was a mature Christian, my dad raised me with certain principles that he, as a member of the greatest generation, World War II combat veteran, submariner, he just taught me. He said, you know, son, right is right and wrong is wrong. You can wink at some stuff, but there's some stuff you can't wink at. I'm still not winking. Very much at all. Ever. You can read more about all this in detail in the written piece. Checking the time. He goes on to finish his essay. The issue is not simply about supporting or not supporting Trump. President Trump and his endorsement among the modern-day Pharisees, the entire Christian right, 83% by default or affirmation of the evangelical white church in America, still supports this man. Still, wherever I go, supports this man. Still, in the polls that are harder to take now because they're hiding a little bit. But all I get in response for, 30 face-to-face, chit-chat interviews. Well, I can't vote for Biden. I can't vote for Biden. I've heard this phrase over and over, and he's a demon. He's demon-driven. He's a demon. While by default or affirmation defending the demonic Mr. Trump. The church is in so damned much trouble. And I use that term carefully. So much in damned trouble. And pastors are not, well, they're winking a lot. They're winking a whole lot. Wouldn't want to be in your shoes. I got enough trouble wearing my own. He writes, there has been a loss of faith, compassion, and sound reason in the church because the pastors will not address it head on. He finishes, the only reason the church and its leaders have been listened to in Washington at all is because even among our detractors, they've always been considered the salt of the earth. Here's what Jesus said. Now, in the context in which we're discussing, listen to the master. You are the salt of the earth, beloved. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? Stay with it. It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Do you get what Jesus Christ is saying about his own people that have become unsalty, unsavory, not driven by the light of Christ anymore, but by crass, pragmatic politics? You're no good anymore to me, says the Lord, except to be trampled underfoot, thrown out. This is strong stuff. This is powerful stuff. I don't hear it preached, Pastor. And you had better get to it. Not because I say so. He said so. The letters marked in red in your Bible. I don't apologize for the sarcasm. You deserve it. Jesus used it. I'm in good company with the likes of our own leaders. Conclusion then, Shreve was roundly criticized. I could relate for what he wrote and what he said and what he taught. There are some details here you can read. But little did even he realize that just 2 years later, those same Trump domestic terrorists, his terminology, I agree with it, would try to violently undermine a federal presidential election and attempt a political coup d'etat at the nation's capital on January 6, 2021, or that Trump was likely to be reelected in November, I think it's November 3rd, Tuesday, November 3rd, 2024, to assume his position behind the resolute desk again in January 2025. He's still the odds-on favorite. 92, 93 felony charges against him. I may be the king of the fools. I still think he's going to be president. Maybe people say, well, maybe another MAGA. There's nobody to fill his dark, vicious shoes. Not DeSantis, not, I can name a few. Little did he know that Trump is being charged effectively of high crimes and misdemeanors according to the United States Constitution, Section 4, Article 2. They're not using that terminology yet, but that's the foundation of all the charges. The teaching. Back to the scripture. Key term here, hypocrite, from the Greek hypocrites, an actor, a stage player, dissembler. Let me stop. If there's anything among men that God hates among men, it's a hypocrite using his name for satanic purpose. You don't get any lower than that, beloved. This is serious business. An actor, stage player, dissembler, pretender, one who answers falsely, a two-faced person whose profession does not match their practice. Someone who says one thing but does another, one who has the form of godliness without the power, or who assumes an appearance of piety and virtue, while factually destitute of what they called in past centuries true religion, true canonical Christianity. Commentary this time, some snippets from Matthew Poole, who writes, "You can, saith our Savior, make observations upon the works of God in nature and are common in providence. You know how to do that well. You're farmers, you're ranchers, you understand how to read those signs. But you cannot, says Jesus in a loud voice, an angry voice, discern the signs of the times." Can you imagine him saying it any other way? Oh, well, you guys got it wrong. So let's sit down and talk about that. Let's dialogue. Let's dialogue about this, Let's reason together. Let's figure this out. Is the presentation of the Christ I see in so many films it makes me want to vomit. I won't name them. You are only dull at making observations upon the scriptures and the will of God revealed in them concerning me, says the Lord. You might observe that all the signs of the Messiahs are fulfilled in me. I was born of a virgin, prophesied by Isaiah, and it goes down through his credentials. And says, paraphrasing, all these are the signs of the time when the Messiah was to come, but these things you cannot see. You cannot discern them. You will not look for them. But like a company of hypocrites who pretend one thing and do another, you come and ask for a sign, that you might believe in me when you have so many, and yet will not believe. So I'll give you a sign, the sign of Jonah. You can figure that out from the context. Let me first point out that the reason I selected Frederick Douglass's quote, is because I'm convinced, and I've written about it twice before, and will continue to argue that the very same ugly spirit of slavery and bigotry and oppression is still in the American bloodstream. I see it every day. I hear it every day here in Colorado. I certainly saw it in Virginia. Not so much out in California, liberal land, la-la land. I'm not defending what goes on there, but I'm just saying when I used to body surf in the coastal California, the one thing we feared more than anything was undertow. And man, once or twice I got caught in a bit, but I'd been taught a little bit how to swim back at an angle and get back in. Never seriously. There's an undertow in America today, beloved. It's strong, it's forceful, and it has overcome, I think, if not a powerful minority, a slight majority in the land, and in the years to come, I think it will conquer nearly all. That undertow is dark, it's wicked, it's evil, it's political, it's spiritual, and it's in the church. And nobody's addressing it. Of note, who has a big megaphone. So all these little guys got to come by. I think there are 7 of them. Further, I've argued and argue again, if the American church does not awaken very soon, here's where I'm at a pivot point, a turning point. Some would say a tipping point. I think we're already across the line, the Rubicon. I do. I started this in earnest 3 years ago, started it primitively 7 or 8 years ago. I've been arguing and debating and talking and writing and speaking constantly about America's need and the church's need to turn around. I don't have one convert in 8 years, except I have 2, including my webmaster, who's a trumper. Lovely man, dear man. He came to, we meet every now and then. I give him a modest fee for his helping me with the technology. And I'll just say his first name, Wayne. And he reads all my stuff because he's got help with the editing and the posting and that sort of thing. He said, Cliff, I got to tell you, this is after 5 years of working with me. Got to tell you, man, gosh, I think you might be right. So don't give up all hope yet. He's a lovely man. He's been through a lot. All of this big idea stuff. I tell the Lord all the time, God, this is Cliff Kelly here. I'm not a big theologian or this or that. I got my PhD from Bowling Green University and not Harvard or Yale or Princeton. I'm not a big guy. This is awfully big. It reminded me of a doctor I grew to love, former abortionist. I think he committed over 2,000 abortions, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, the late Dr. Bernard Nathanson, Jewish, I believe. And the last years of his life, he was just so pro-life and eloquently so. He used the term back then to describe the abortion holocaust, mysterium tremendum. Mysterium tremendum. In all of his intelligence and ability, intellectual, he could not find the words to describe 42 million dead babies. He didn't know how to do it. Here's the definition of mysterium tremendum. A terrible mystery, a sense of, and I'm referring to what's happening in the church today. A terrible mystery, a sense of something mysterious, overwhelming, and daunting, which elicits from us a sense of diminution, humility, submission, fear, creatureliness, the feeling of the uncanny, of that which is awesome, or even to reverence, the sense of dependence, of impotence, or of nothingness to even begin to stop it or put it this way or that way, the feelings of religious overwhelmment and exaltation, the sense of the tremendous, the awful, and mysterious, or what this is taken from Rudolf Otto, the numinous. Too large to explain in human language. And I understand why I'm applying this. We're talking about nothing less, and the very title of my first book, the end of history, the end of reality as we know it. After 6,000 years, if you're a young earther, 0.72 billion years if you're an old earther, I don't care about the debate right now. The point is, this is it. A former roommate of mine, friend of mine from college, I was a long-haired hippie back in the 60s. He was a dope-smoking hippie. He was a graduate of West Point. Charles Preston Miller III. I don't know how the two of us got together, but he would speak some very bad Spanish and try to say this. Es el partido viejo de pelota más grande, which is his garbled version of, this is the whole ball game. This is it, beloved. You can stop wondering and start praying and studying more than you've ever done before. This is it. This is the wrap-up. We're in the birth pangs. This is these rumblings and everything you see. This is what Jesus, the law, the prophets, the apostles, and the church fathers talked about. It's here. It's here. Pastors, get a clue and teach on it, please. So, all I can do, let's see, I'm coming to the end. I'm glad I've got these shorter. All I can simply add at this point, having given you the sense of the overwhelm, which is a word I kind of made up and put it at the end of this thing. All I can do is quote the great apostle, Paul, of course, in his letter to the church at Corinth, 1 Corinthians 2, 8, and 9. Now, in the context of all this largesse, of all this mass of idea and tumult of thousands of years of human history and becoming to a kind of a conical narrowing point toward the end as things speed up. There's a law of physics there somewhere, but I'm not bright enough to tell you what that might be. He wrote this to the Corinthians. But on the contrary, beloved, as the scripture says, what eye has not seen, and ear has not heard, and has not entered into the heart of man all that God has prepared and made and keeps at the ready for those who love him. Truly love him, not just say they do. They do it by their life and conduct. Who hold him in affectionate reverence, promptly obeying him, and gratefully recognize the benefits he has bestowed. We don't know. Paul even said, I cannot tell you. 2 or 3 times he said, I don't have the human words to describe. In his visit to third heaven, it was the same phenomenon. Though he saw it, he came back and couldn't describe what he had experienced. It's so, the only word I can think of is overwhelm. It's an O with a capital O. It's so big. We're talking about, and I write in the book that's, by the way, coming out now, final, on October 30th, my 44th spiritual birthday. It'll be out. These are the galleys for the final cover. I forgot my point. That's what you do for bragging, Cliff. I write here, even the words of the Lord, even his words, beggar in the Bible, because it's for us humans. He's got a lot more language than he gave us. I promise you that. A fuller, richer reveal, because we are limited to human language. Severely restricted grasp of the divine, or in Dr. Otto's brilliant efforts, the holy. How do we describe the holy, the numinous, the mysterium tremendum? How do we describe eternity? How do we describe what is to become of us corporeally and corporately when our bodies change? I saw one video on the rapture. It's the most spectacular I've ever seen, beautifully done. I may post it, but everybody thinks you're, a little weird, but it's brilliant, and it agreed word for word with a vision my dear, dear friend back in North Carolina had. It was the translation of our bodies, wasn't it? You see these bodies flying up in the air, clothes falling off. I think that'd be kind of embarrassing. Anyway, no. The transformation was into, and this is what she saw in the vision, these intense points of light. Little round global points of light. And they began to rise, and then all around the planet. Just these millions, if there be that many in the remnant, I think so, of points of light ascending into the heavens. It's the most spectacular thing I've ever seen. The background music is Michael Smith's song, Heroes. I may play it or I may post it at some point when I get my courage up. So at this point, having also failed and stumbled around with my own words and language, I must simply and most profoundly, I write, bow down very low and leave it all right there. I don't have the words, and I'm a pretty good wordsmith. I don't have the words. to either describe the wonder for those who are obedient to Christ or the horror of those who by any means available to them reject all of his truth. Father, I stumble and then I bow before the crown of heaven, before the throne, before your word, before even the apostle who struggled with his words, Paul, to describe what you yet have in store for both those who are righteous and those who are unrighteous. It is beyond description. I try every Saturday, sometimes in between the week, to bring what I can possibly bring to the attention of the church. I continue to aim my strongest armament toward the pastors, not to condemn them to hell. I don't have that authority, but to wake them up. I've tried every other thing for 8 years, from soft whispers and coffee lattes and sweet little talk and hugs and handshakes to this, where I am today, because nothing has worked. Nothing has worked. I don't know if I could preach this as canon, but I believe that you start out gently with us. Then you turn up the volume and the intensity, and then if nothing else will work, you bring out the heavy artillery, not to kill people or condemn people, but to wake them up from their slumber. I'm trying, God. I don't pretend to be doing it very well, but I'm trying. We're all trying, this little community of YouTubers and Facebookers and LinkedIners and a few others. Please, please, help us to know how to do this even better in the days to come, because we'll need to know how to do it better. In Christ's name, amen. God bless you all. We've continued to finish earlier than usual. I've got the next week's schedule laid out. I'll publish it probably Sunday night or Monday. I've got teachings. This is not a boast. I've never experienced this in all my days as a Christian teacher. Each morning, it gives me what we call précis. I've got enough here to last us to the end of the month. They're all different. They're all new to me. That's how I spend my mornings, doing that for you. God bless you. See you next week.